All right. I think this is going to be the first video on a channel that probably will never be used often again unless something clicks off here or not. But over the past week, a lot of people have been voicing their displeasure with the LCS, Riot's League of Legends, North American Esports League, and the announcement of a date change from Saturday, Sunday to Thursday, Friday, on top of a time change to where games are going to be played 12 p.m. Pacific time to roughly around 5 p.m. Pacific time as well, in that 5 hour span. Now, like a lot of people here, it's been upsetting. I've seen a lot of people online be pretty upset about it, including myself. David, I cannot pronounce his last name, but I'll put a link to his Twitter and maybe in his YouTube channel in the description. He's somebody I've been following lately that's done a really good job voicing the business concern and his concern as an NA fan on the East Coast. They give you perspective on me. I am somebody who is in management with my current company of work in Boise, Idaho, in the Mountain Time. So for me, LCS is going to be taking place between 1 p.m. locally to 6 p.m., which generally means unless I'm not busy at work and I'm like on my phone when I probably shouldn't be, or if I am on a lunch, I will only be able to catch those type of games. So I'm pretty negatively impacted by this and everything, but I feel like after watching through Hotline League, seeing some like talk, I think everybody's had that super angry state, but it's now kind of the holidays. We all realize that Riot is going to be on a holiday break, and we shouldn't let this horrible news carry on a negative attitude that can bleed into our regular lives during Christmas. So I think we're seeing the anger still there, but I think we're going to see people walk back, and we're not going to see it pushed up as much as we probably hope or feel it should. But I wanted to take the opportunity to really voice everything kind of that's been going on in my head since I saw the news, and kind of where my frustrations are as a whole. Because for me, it's not even I'm upset obviously because I'm going to be able to watch less LCS this year, and I feel like that they're making the decision to limit people like me's ability to watch the LCS. Why I'm frustrated more than anything, besides the communication aspect, but I understand why they communicated it the way that they did. Not in that I support it. It clearly was a pump and dump story. You dump the story out during the holiday season in hopes that after the New Year season comes and everybody comes back, we get the kind of the global introduction party type thing, that people will be happy with that as we move forward, and the numbers will show that Riot was right to make this decision. That's Riot's esports play. They're hoping, by putting it when they did and leaving like no actual announcements and giving no engagement, they're hoping by the time they come back at the start of the season in January, the heat will die off and that the viewership numbers will show, hey, we made the right decision, stop yelling at us, it was what we had to do. What makes me more upsetting is somebody who's been here way in the past, since when I was in college in 2011, 2010, when I first got introduced by the LCS by some lovely individuals, is seeing where it's going and knowing that this decision wasn't surprising to me. This was a decision that makes perfect sense when you go through Riot's esports history, from all the conversations I've had with people like Nick Allen, Chris Badaway, other people who are heavily involved with Riot and esports. This decision with the schedule change and the time change is literally should have been obvious and predicted from the get-go. In this video here, I'm really going to be kind of going over how we got here, the LCS schedule change. I'm going to kind of go over the history that Riot has for esports and their vision, and how their scheduling not only just affects us and why we are being put in a position that maybe people who are working or in the middle of the day aren't going to be able to watch, why that happened, but also you can see this bleed into other things, whether it be world format tournaments with the scheduling there, and even things like EU in the past where there has been scheduling decisions made where they put EU LCS or LEC on later in the day, which is easier to stomach as a fan to get North American people the chance to watch it. This isn't just an issue of Riot positioning themselves only at the LCS. They've made decisions like this, and they continue to make decisions like this pretty much in any league that the global department has a huge grasp on. But that's the gist of this video. How we got here, LCS change. We'll also go into kind of the history of the LCS and viewership performances and why we aren't going to see any changes happening before the spring split starts, especially when it comes to moving the time frame down. That's 100% not going to happen, and there's viewership history-wise, reasons why that will not happen. We're going to talk, look into franchising and how that changed Riot's way they ran the LCS, as well as how they were forced to, run this league differently than what they had in the past, in the global, landscape. I'm gonna kind of break down the NA viewer space and what I believe in my, just to give me an opinion, what I think the NA viewer space wants and values when it comes to esports. Here we're gonna be taking a deep dive not just into League, but I think Fortnite is a huge, huge thing that I think when you look at how, and Valorant too, when you look at how NA consumes esports content, there's a very clear reason what they go for, and there's a very clear thing that drives them away, and it hurts viewership over time. And then I would go in the final part. I'm going to kind of go over what I would do in this current situation, or what I would have done in previous situations, and how I think moving forward, the LCS, what they have to do to be able to successfully start changing this narrative, and build something that is going to last longer. And become a stable point for competition as in North America moving forward. But first, I'm going to start out with Riot's esports vision. To understand why the LCS is being put at 12 p.m. Pacific time, and being played even for East Coast times at a pretty early, horrible time on a weekday, that if you're working a job that has you work generally be till like 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., you're going to miss most of the games. And when I even say working a job between 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., I'm not including getting home from work and making yourself dinner. And if you have a significant other, connecting with them and stuff like that. I think for an average person, as an adult speaking, I get off of work with my job roughly around 6:30 to 7 o'clock. It takes me probably about an hour and a half to drive home, get settled, eat dinner before I even think about putting something on the TV. I might put something on in the background. When it comes to sports, I'm a Philadelphia Flyers fan, so I'll watch some of their games through ESPN Plus. But I don't really start actively watching things until about 45 minutes to an hour after I get home from work, sometimes even an hour and a half. But why, in this situation, would you ask, would Riot be placing itself at a North American time in such a slot where North America, it isn't popular? Well, Riot from the very start has always been about the gamer. They value and they brand themselves as a company that wants to give the gamer the opportunity to interact with esports or any of their products however they wish. And when it comes to Riot Esports, they want a gamer to have the ability to easily access and watch any region they can in the best way possible. That means they schedule to where, in ways where people in Europe should have easy access to watch North American games. They schedule Europe to where it's later in the day, that even when their games sometimes end past midnight, past 1 a.m. I've seen plenty of times where LEC is ending at 1 a.m. local time, which it's pretty insane to think that way. Would they schedule LEC later in the day on the so that and North American people, especially East Coast people, have the chance to watch the LEC. So they schedule their broadcast times and they schedule their what days they're being played on, especially for the Western ones that I feel have a lot more of a influence from Riot Global coming out of LA. They schedule them as if a person is going to watch every single version of esports out there at the time. And they even showed this in their data that roughly over half of the amount of people who watched the LCS last season, and probably the seasons beforehand, were also people who were trying to watch the LEC. This is why, contrary to popular opinion, the weekday change was made not because they wanted to give Valorant a weekend primetime slot. It's because Riot felt that the average esports person, the average LoL esport person who would watch the LEC and the LCS, it was taking up way too much of their time to have 10 games be played on that same day, and that they're more likely to intake both of those contents by splitting them off into different days. And by giving them a time that is earlier in the day for North America, they still feel that they're going to capture a North American audience in the afternoon, whether it be through people who are watching through college, where the schedules may have them free in the afternoon, people who might be working different style of shifts. There's a lot of people who do stay-at-home work. There's a lot of people who work contract-style jobs that aren't hard in the office 9 to 5 anymore, as well as capturing the East Coast younger audience coming out of school that aren't a part of extracurricular activities. They think that their data shows, and since the daily spikes have it earlier in the day, that this is going to be able to attract those type of people while also still valuing and giving value to the EU time slot for people who are going to be in London around 7 p.m., who are going to be in Germany around 9 p.m. They're going to have a chance to easily intake the LCS as a LoL esports fan and make them happy. We see these changes also for schedule happen all the time when we get to tournaments. Consistently, when we're in Europe for Worlds or MSI, the schedule has games being played like at 11 p.m., 12 p.m. local time, so that it's at decent viewing times for places like China and Korea. And a lot of times we get European people upset of like, how am I supposed to attend these weekday group stage games or stuff like that when it is at such an early time that I'm going to be at work or I'm going to be at school. Riot's goal isn't to make the people happy where each individual thing is located first. Their goal is to give the most broad appeal possible. They live in a world where they feel where they schedule their LoL esports schedule on their thing, that they're scheduling for the idea of a fan that watches every league possible to them. Not scheduling for fans being a fan of said league or said team in said league, and that's what they're giving their time to. And this goes back all the way to the LCS creation. There were times where the EU and NA LCS never really ran at the same weekend schedule. In fact, it got to a point where the EU LCS were being run on the weekday unoptimally that it almost killed their viewership, and it took a whole rebrand and almost recensoring around Europe first to get people back on board. On top of, in my opinion, of the G2 and Fnatic finals, giving the European fans energy, believing that they actually had a chance internationally. Since the final appearances have happened, European viewership has dropped over time, minus the COVID spike. But when you take out the COVID spike, there's a pretty linear downward path for the LEC in Europe in that type of a way. So how we got here for the Riot Esports Vision. They picked a schedule that showed that people are active on Twitch at this time. It's a time period that is easily accessible for people in Europe, as well as if they're having the idea of college kids, people at work watching it, people at home watching it. You're giving people an opportunity to do that there without turning off the overall LOL esports viewer who they feel watches all league esports possible to them. Now, and that's also why they separated EU and NA on different days, because they felt that the binge model for both LEC and LCS was unsustainable, and you were basically causing people to choose between one or the other, but not both. So their hope is that we're going to see an uptick in viewership on the weekdays now that the league esports fans are going to be able to only have to choose between one of those two instead of two of them. Now, I hear a lot of people talking about the schedule and why are the busy games not in the later afternoon, and maybe that we should shift the schedule so that it starts later in the day. Well, this is where the history of LCS and viewership performances come in, and Papa Smithy said this during Hotline League, is LCS has tried in a few different ways to have Friday Night League, Monday Night League, the best of threes, the best of three formats where they had games being played on Fridays evenings. And each one of those times, the viewership numbers in terms of average viewers were so low compared to the weekend style of a spam that they kind of cut them out within at longest point a year in making them. This means that you aren't going to see, Riot is not going to push LCS back to a later start time, because in their historical data and opinion, they've had that before, and it has shown an extreme drop in viewership from what they're normally getting in the normal Saturday, Sunday time slot. So it's picking up and moving LCS to be later in the evening later in the afternoon and evening on Thursday and Friday is going to result in a significant drop in viewership because of everything they've seen in the past. Which is very true, I agree. I'm somebody who thinks that moving it to the weekdays, no matter what with this time period or not, you're going to see about a 25 to 30% drop. This is something that you see pretty much across esports in general. When you have esports being primarily on weekdays compared to the weekends, you get about a 25 to 30% drop in viewership compared to a more primetime slot. And even if you go to the League of Legends tab on TwitchTracker.com, they show that there's about 45% more people are watching League of Legends category on the weekend comparatively to the weekdays. Now, when I go in, so that's why we're seeing the games being, put into the 12 p.m., prime time slot in their eyes, and we're not going to see it move back because in the past they've tried doing that and it's brought no viewership. Now, I'll go into this more of what I think needs to happen going forward, but one of the things the LCS has gotten into that has caused major issues and why viewership is so important to keep numbers up high is when franchising happened, which is kind of my next topic, in 2017, they forced teams to buy $10 million into the league. They upped the minimum wage for players to be roughly six figures at minimum, which means teams are at least pumping in $500,000 a year. Most of them are pumping well over $1 million a year into their esports franchise slot. They've invested over $10 million, so they've had an 8-figure investment in there. So Riot had to find ways to make them their money back and make this investment profitable. This meant they really had to emphasize on bringing in sponsors, and because Riot's esports vision is making esports as accessible to their player as possible, this took away any potential to sell broadcasting rights to the league to a service like Twitch or YouTube. We've seen BAMTech sponsorship that has failed, that was supposed to be netting them hundreds of millions of dollars. Recently, we saw FTX collapse, and with a recent lawsuit, there has been, we noticed there was almost $100 million over the like a 5 or 6 year period that the FTX was sponsoring LCS for. We have no idea what the viewership is for. The viewership. We have no idea what the actual cost payments are for things like State Farm, MasterCard, Bud Light. But we do know that the LCS needing sponsorships meant that they had to get higher viewers, and they had to put viewership first. The reason why I think this is a almost damning point in LCS history is that by putting an emphasis on viewership so much, first, we had to change how we presented the league to fans. Ever since the start, it has been pretty obvious the best way to get viewership, the highest average viewership at least, is by spamming 5 games 2 times a week on Saturday and Sunday. This meant that we were stuck in a best of 1 format, where teams only got to play 2 times a week, and that instead of separating them into like their own style of broadcast and their own type of content, to where a fan base can be built around individual teams and sometimes even individual players, they were put on a binge model 5-game broadcast that went from start to finish, and to keep the average high, you had to have it to where a viewer was watching all the games. And in turn of spamming out and having a viewership model where a person was watching all the games, this meant that viewers had to invest in the idea of the LCS as their favorite thing, instead of investing in individual teams or players as their favorite thing. Now, that's not to say that there aren't like fan bases and there aren't people who are TSM fans hardcore, and there aren't people that are 100 Thieves fans hardcore. But in a system to where you kind of have a rotating 5 games a day schedule, and you're only really getting at max an hour of content, 2 times a week of gameplay, and the way the broadcast flows, you can't really give that much more dedication to storylines, and you can't give any dedication. You can't form everything around a certain matchup. That meant that you didn't give people an easy way to connect to teams, and you had to have people buy into more of the league as a whole. That meant when you have international tournaments like MSI and Worlds, people were more invested in North America doing well than their team doing well. And given that North America has way smaller player bases, that this way smaller player base means that the solo queue experience isn't as high quality, and players, no matter where they come from, aren't going to be pushed as hard as servers like Europe, Korea, or China, where their player bases are twice as much, if not way higher, that are producing higher quality players in their solo queue. There's just so many reasons why North America shouldn't succeed internationally. I know it's popular to shit on NA and say that owners suck. They invest so much money, they buy all these these people and all these imports, and they suck at Worlds. They're stupid. Like, I am of the belief you can take DRX with their full roster, or even T1 with their full roster from last year's World Finals, put them in North America for a full year, where they have to play in the LCS, where they have to train on NA solo queue, and even with the new, oh my goodness, why am I blanking on it? With the new queue system, Champions queue, even with all of that, when they went to MSI and they went to Worlds, they would be struggling to make it out of group stage, just like LCS teams will. Why? Because they'll be practicing against lower quality people on the NA server that is not going to push their skills in terms of reaction times and what they're abused for. And because they're not getting their skills pushed, their overall level of what it takes to succeed against, the teams coming from other regions. They're just going to get run over. They're going to lose in lane advantages, and they're going to most likely lose majority of their games. But because you've created a model for viewership purposes to keep getting sponsors as high as they are, a model to where you can't really invest hard into one team because you only are given like 2 hours of content, and in most of that 2 hours it's just playing of the game. You end up in a world where you only care about your region, and your region sucks internationally. So why am I watching this region locally anymore? I don't know. I don't have much regional pride. I don't like watching losers, and viewership goes down. And you can go, like, if you were to track as much as you can on esports charts and Twitch tracker, you can see when Team Liquid made MSI finals, when Cloud9 made the semifinals at Worlds in Korea, you had a new kind of uptick and spike of the LCS because we saw us competing internationally well. But once we got back that, once that ended and we stopped making it out of groups again, over time, you had a consistent downward drop. And we had one COVID summer where we saw a huge uptick again. COVID was a time when everybody was home. People were watching content that they don't ever really get a chance to watch or normally wouldn't watch. Sports were all pretty much done. So if you were kind of intaking competitive things, esports was kind of the way to go. But if you take away that one thing, there's a pretty linear path that matches to where LCS kind of landed where it would have been without COVID. And I know there's a lot of data that suggests that people don't care about international results and things like that. And I do think those surveys have merit in different ways, and we'll get into that with what does the NA viewer space want, in my opinion. I do think it has a major effect because you even see it with LEC when Europe barely makes it out of groups or doesn't make it out of groups, and they get swept in the first round of MSI or World's knockout stage. They perform worse year to year, and split to split. It's a pretty undeniable trend, and I'm somebody no matter what surveys and people say, when you can start correlating things over a decade period, that tends to be more reliable than a survey that's been given out. But back to franchising, because franchising forces us to be needing viewership to get sponsorship monies to pay for the $10 million franchising fee and to make these teams that are generally 7-figure budgets each year profitable. We have sacrificed a whole lot in terms of how to grow out the scene. I personally think going back to the best of 3 days when we had split broadcast dates, it hurt the overall viewership and averages, yes. But what you were creating there were people who were becoming fans of teams. You were actually creating a system to where people can pick and choose what they want to watch, and something that I felt would be sustainable years, moving forward years down the line. We've seen this with Korea and China to where their broadcast systems aren't built around the idea that they need to maximize their viewership. They have the 5-day best of 3 systems where people can pick and choose what days they watch the games. And yeah, they have viewership that supports that. Obviously, the game culturally is a lot bigger there. But I think the reason why they're being, we're seeing major growth out of them now, to where, LCK has had a big boom on Twitch in the past year with viewership, and we're seeing China being able to keep expanding, is they've set a world where their fan bases are being able to successfully integrate and back teams, and connect to teams. When you have a best of 3 broadcast, you're able to have a broadcast built around 2 teams that builds a story up that allows fans to connect to people. And that over time, people can pick and choose what they watch, and you don't have to have this idea where everybody has to watch everything. It creates a healthier viewing environment in terms of retention-wise, and people will care more about individual results. in terms of who wins a series, who loses a series, who wins a split, who loses a split. A current binge model, 5 games over 2 days, you lose the value of what games matter. You lose the value of what upset matters. For a lot of people, because we have 6 to 8 teams make playoffs, it doesn't really matter. Like, only thing that really ends up mattering most is the playoffs themselves. And when we get to that point, you're basically just giving people more and more reason why not to watch something. And when you give people more reasons why not to watch and be attached to something, you lose viewership over time. So that's why I think this play for viewership overall, to keep finding ways to make to squeeze the most viewership out of stuff, to pay for sponsorships, to pay for franchising, is a short-term solution to a long-term problem, to where they're not actually engaging with what viewers want, and they're not engaging in a way to make viewers attached to the product beyond just the whole league as a whole. They're not making it easy for viewers to be attached to players. They're not making it easy for viewers to be attached to teams. And because they're in LA only and they don't travel outside of LA besides for finals, there's little to no reason for people to be attached to the league as a whole. Now, what the NA viewer space wants. This is something I think is very interesting, and I think we see a lot of people, whether it be NAAMN, Travis Gafford, Papa Smithy, like, they want content creators. In North America, we've seen a huge rise in content creators like your XQCs, Ludwig, Tyler One, Tim the Tapman, Ninja was a big one, Shroud, Asmongold, Dr. Disrespect. What it is driving people to Twitch, YouTube now is not esports as a whole. It is content creator personalities. And because of this, it has been increasingly hard for the LCS and any esports to really get a hold in North America. In fact, when you look at the most successful teams in LCS history in terms of bringing in viewership and engagement, it's ones that have content creation as leaders as a head. You have your early day LCSs when they were bringing in 300,000+ viewers. When you had your I'm a Cutie Pies, your Double Ifs, your Dyrus's, Odd Ones. Back when Twitch was still, back when the idea of a content creator was more about if you're good at a game rather than if you're funny and entertaining. Not to say that Sneaky and Double Lift and Dyrus and all them aren't entertaining, but early day Twitch, the way to get clicks and views were to be Diamond Master, Diamond, Challenger in a game, not necessarily, having just the base personality. So when LCS has done its best, it's when they had the most of its content creators out there. And there's a lot of people now who are saying we need players to become, we need players to be streaming, we need players to be giving out content and stuff like that. And I think they're right. I think there is a big reason why you should be wanting that from players and teams and stuff. But my big pushback is being a content creator in today's landscape of North America goes way beyond just turning on a stream. It goes way beyond just recording your own social media video. You have to be entertaining and open to dialogue with chat and a group of people to build a community. There are so many people in North America that are turning into streamers that are around 50 to 200 average viewers to gain personal connections to fellow streamers, to fellow chatmates, to fellow people in Discord, Twitter. They're looking for communities to build their relationships around and to create an online community fan base. For LCS to make a big viewership dent through content creation, those type of people, that type of viewership experience and that type of content level is not good enough. To see a rise in North American viewership back into the $150,000 to $200,000 range, in my opinion, is you need to have some of these. You need to have players be in the top tier of content creators. You need to have people being, able to be getting as many viewers as your Tyler Ones. You need to have players who are getting as many viewers and can be said in the same breath as your Valkyrays, your Pokemains, your Ludwigs. And to do that, I think you have to, as esport orgs, you have to get these players into those type of videos. And I'll go into that and what I think the current situation moving forward. But this isn't something that just matches just with the LCS. The idea of big content creators on Twitch lead to best esports viewership in North American esports. Another game I think that correlates this perfectly is Valorant. When you look at North American numbers last year and even the first year with Valorant, they were decent to weak in terms of what you would compare it to the LCS, with one exception, and that is the team of Sentinels. Sentinels were able to get a player from Cloud9 called Tens that became viral in the content creator marketplace. Him and his now fiancee Kaide were always able to, through streaming as well as other forms of VOD content, connect with a viewer base in North America that were, they were in conversations of Courage JDs. They were in conversations of the Strouds, the conversations of the Valkyrays and stuff. They got put into that content creator world to where they became recognizable to the everyday viewer of content for North America. And even when they were bad last year, they were easily pulling up the best viewership possible for North America. People still watch Sentinels whether they sucked or whether they were good. Obviously, they had some success in the first year, and that also helped add the Tens' kind of going viral in North America. But really, their viewership in North America last year, viewership of Valorant in North America last year really depended on Sentinels and the idea of content creating creators attracting to an audience to them. No other bigger example of this is during the Last Chance qualifier, because Sentinels was having so many issues in the year, they were trying something different. They brought in Shroud. One of the biggest content creators on Twitch, formerly of Mixer. He is known up there with Ninja as probably one of the most recognizable names from all of his work in PUBG and other style of games. He decided he was going to make a run back on Sentinels and pro play, and this caused a 600,000 view peak for North America that year, where the only peak after that was around 220,000. So Shroud alone, him coming back as a content creator, gave almost a 3 times viewership boost for Sentinels games, in which they only had 3 matches in that Last Chance qualifier because they still sucked. But it shows people aren't there for the quality. They're there to see their content creators play in matches. And they're looking for content creators directly to give their support behind. And big content creators nonetheless, not small ones. Another esport that I think illustrates this amazingly well is Fortnite. Fortnite peaked during the World Cup stage where they had open World Cup qualifiers, to where a lot of the esports, a lot of the content creator personalities really tried to make the World Cup final. Some of them did, like Tfue. But that's what drove viewership pretty high moving into the Fortnite World Cup. But if you looked at how it got built, how did the esports viewership train get built in North America, as well as even in Europe? It was with the summer skirmishes, when the first kind of year that Fortnite came out. And those summer skirmishes were invitational tournaments where they invited popular content creators to participate in the tournaments. People like Daquan, Myth, Ninja, Tim the Tatman, Pokimane, Valkyrie. These people were competing for first place prizes, courage, in a scene that there was no actual way, an open qualifier way for the quote unquote best players to move up and to take over the scene. This allowed for a lot of great moments. People were invested in their content creators competing and having a chance to call themselves the best. And because there weren't any actual professional tournaments, this, for all extensive purposes, were the esport tournaments for Fortnite. And they averaged in the 200 to 300,000 viewers a tournament. This was at a time where it was outperforming the LCS. Really, Fortnite was the only tournament that was, the esport that was consistently able to outperform North American LCS for a full year. When it, with just North American play. And that success of 300 or so thousand bled into the success of the World Cup with those content creators trying to qualify every week. What happened after that, though, is after the World Cup, we moved into what was called the FNCS era of Fortnite, where all of their tournaments regionally were done in a open qualifier metric. And content creators like your Tim the Tatmans, like your Ninjas, like your Courages, Nick Merckx, they could never qualify for finals. They could barely qualify for semifinals if they were lucky. Of these FNCS weeks, so they stopped competing in Fortnite competitions, and as time went on, the viewership dropped tremendously without these content creators backing the actual esports scene, to the point where North American Fortnite Championship Series, the North American FNCS, is only peaking around 50 to 60,000, and the average is closer to 30,000 now. And that's over a course of 3 years. You took away the content creators and had these professionals who are grinding nonstop, that aren't putting out content, that their only goal is to be the best in the esport. North American audiences could care less. That's, North American Fortnite is in way worse of a position than what North American League of Legends is like. They went from being able to have 300,000 people watching during the summer skirmish days down to struggling to get 50,000 people to consistently watch in the current modern days. And that was only about a 3 to 4 year change. So what this means is that for LCS to actually improve in viewership, it needs to create players to in a content world to where they are pulling as much viewership or pulling as much media attention as the Valkyries, as the Ludwigs, the Tim the Tatmans, people like that. And that leads me to what would I do in this current situation moving forward. But with the time slot how it is, and with the viewership what it is, I would 100% invest in content for these players and these teams, but it wouldn't be content that would go on the main channel exactly of these teams. I would try to find ways for my players, especially my top players, to be in other people's content. I think an example of this that would have worked previous years is, Cutie Cinderella is a content creator who loves putting up events, loves putting up little things like the IRL Clue. She's a huge baking streamer. She loves to make these events. And she used to be a part of TSM. I think a perfect way that TSM should have utilized having a popular content creator under their license and marketing it with the LCS team is you could have had a once a week baking stream where Cutie Cinderella has a member of TSM on a stream, and it's a Q&A podcast type thing to her audience with that TSM player in like a baking stream. And then hopefully you take that TSM player and you can roll him in, if he's able to be a good personality and the audience can get attached, he's able to roll it easily into his own streams and connect people that way. If I was 100 Thieves, I would be having Among Us videos where Courage JD Valkyrie, Nadeshot, popular 100 Thieves content creators were playing with the LCS teams on either the 100 Thieves channel or those people's channels with streams. It makes a big deal when you're able to be put part in these groups. Valkyrie is an owner of 100 Thieves. It shouldn't be hard to go up to her and say, "Hey, when you have a Sussy Sunday, and it's your turn to invite, can you invite one or two LCS players that we think will show a good personality in those streams and stream during them?" Yes. Have these people like Valkyrie and Courage JD raid into LCS players and streamers like Tenacity and Busio so they can get 20,000 people having eyes on them, and maybe there's going to be a connection, and maybe you can build an audience to where you get a 10 situation. If you're Evil Geniuses, I don't know who you have as a content creator, but hey, find a way to have a co-op partnership maybe with Ludwig, and find a way to have him maybe a game show or something and feature players on his channel and stuff. I know a lot of people in the League esports scene get upset when we bring these personalities onto the LCS broadcast. I understand that, but we could bring our LCS players to their content and really try to exploit them there. That's what I would do. I wouldn't try to build my own content. I think building your own content is way too small, way too narrow. It's not going to make you big enough, given the fact that the LCS itself isn't big enough to grasp a wider audience. You need to put your players and your personalities in content with other people who are very popular in the moment. Offline TV, Saikuno, Valkyrie, it's tough because Tim the Tatman's, part owner of Complexity, but these are things you should be looking to do. You should be looking for ways to get these people involved in bigger content creators programming so that their names become recognizable, and if they are streaming, that they might get a raid and make a deal where they get raided in and they can get a bigger audience off the bat. Because these players, when they're unknown, when they don't have any actual content creator training, when they aren't natural content creators themselves, they are not going to build a viral audience and a big enough audience to bleed into the LCS gaining viewership by just making their own content. You need them to have content with other big content creators, and you need those other big content creators to but you need those bigger content creators to be sponsored by or rated, into the players, to give them a chance to connect on a personal level that can make people want to go in and watch the LCS more. Now, what I would have done moving forward with the LCS and what I would have done previously is I would have invested in the LCS traveling. Every time I see a LCS final given, every time I see whenever Worlds comes around or MSI, it's people saying, when am I going to be able to watch the LCS in my area? And I genuinely think, from my experience going to LCS events, that people who go there not knowing what the LCS is, they hear the cheers, they hear the positive energy, they get into it, they understand it's a big deal, and they come back liking it, and they may come back and wanting to become a viewer of it. Maybe they become a fan of a certain team, so they come in and they tune in for X teams, with their experience. I would have 100%, instead of shifting the days and the time periods, I would have took the LCS and made it into a roadshow to where you were hitting every part of the North American region with live events, and you aren't going to fill up 20,000 seats arenas every week, but you can fill up 500 to you can fill up 1,000 to 200, 2,500 people seated arenas, and where these teams, I think, investment-wise, you may lose some money right now. It may be difficult right now. It may hurt your chances at Worlds and MSI, which are already kind of shitty. But you would actually be investing in North American people, and you would be giving more people in North America a new chance to experience the LCS, to fall in love with the LCS, and to, as time moves on, grow the LCS into something else. But instead, that we're not doing that. We are doing exactly what Riot's esports vision is, which is giving every people across the world an equal opportunity to potentially watch the LCS, and in hopes that the viewership can be high enough to support the sponsors needed to keep the franchise teams happy. And this was a 50-minute long video. I don't know how many people are going to watch and click onto this. I don't know how well my points came across. I kind of did this off the cuff. Like I said, I've had these thoughts for a while. I haven't, I wanted this to get onto the Hotline League and express them more, but I was not really able to. And I really just thought it was therapeutic for me to do that. If you sat around and you like hearing me talk about stuff, I have a movie review channel where I, reviewed for the first half of the year a lot of different movies and some TV series called Josh Does Movies. I'm going to name this channel Josh Does Esports. Leave a like, subscribe, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'll put David's YouTube link because I think he makes some really good content, and I think he'll be doing stuff for both LEC and LCS moving forward. I can't speak to that fully, but he's a really good person in North America that I think is putting out really great short content that might not be 50 plus minutes, but that's not me. I can't bring my words up in 10 seconds or less. So yeah, 51 minutes. Here we are. That's how we got here. LCS schedule change. Thank you for your time if you stayed. Peace.